welcome to this edition of the Harvest Community Church podcast. I'm Matt Garino. I'll be hosting this episode, and with me are three special guests, actually two special guests and one very special guest. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves, starting right here. So tell us who you are.
Hi, everyone. I am Beth Borbin, and I've been attending Harvest for just under 10 years now.
And who's your family and what do you do?
I am part of the paid staff at Harvest. I oversee the children's ministry, and I am married to John. We've been married for just under 20 years now, and we have an 18-year-old son named Cole.
So I asked that question specifically about staff because 10 years. So fun fact that maybe not everybody knows about Beth. Other than me, you are the longest tenured staff member at the church.
Wow.
Right now. Almost 10
awesome.
years,
almost
which is
10
great.
years, yeah.
Which means you've been working with me for 10 years. So question for you. This is like open season. I told you, however, you want to answer it, you're totally free, apart from repercussions or fear of anything. What's one thing you've learned about me over the last 10 years that others may not necessarily see?
A fun fact that I remember learning quite a while ago was that you occasionally enjoy video games. Mm-hmm. Sometimes for the purposes of winding down. You would, when Lizzie lived in Oregon, you guys would sometimes play some strategy games together.
Yeah. We did Lord of the Rings online for a while. Yep. Yeah, that was fun. Also with us is
Sharon Peterson. I am married to Chad Peterson, which is why I started coming to Harvest, actually.
That's right.
I have been at Harvest for about 6 years. We dated for a year, and we've been married for 5. We have a little boy named Micah and a little girl named Hannah. And you might see me in the children's wing helping with Sunday school. I was in nursery this last week, or with the moms group.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. So maybe something people don't know about you. You are a doctor by training and have worked as a doctor for many years. And you did your medical school in the Middle East, right? Was it the UAE or?
Qatar.
I was going to say
Qatar,
but that's not the right way to pronounce it.
I always
Qatar
struggle with how we pronounce it.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. So how long were you there? How long did you live there?
For 4 years.
Okay, so you spent 4 years as a then single white American woman living in the Middle East. What's something about living in the Middle East that might surprise the average American based on your experience?
That's a good question. For me, I grew up in the American world of no prayer in school. Which in my life translated into, you don't talk to people about church or God at all. Not just about not praying, but you just don't talk about God. Well, my time in the Middle East taught me that it's okay to talk about God in public and with other people, because I was in a culture that largely had a belief in God. And it was, in a way, a very freeing experience to learn that it is okay to have conversations in and around God. And I don't know that the average American would think about that if they were traveling to the Middle East, that might be an actual more comfortable setting to talk about God.
Yeah. Think of Middle Eastern cultures being controlling and repressive, and they are in some ways, but maybe less so in other ways. So,
and maybe we have some repressive things in our own culture that we just don't recognize.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, thank you both, our special guest. Now I want to introduce our very special guest. I'm going to let her introduce herself. She is...
I am Amy Garino. So I have been at Harvest because you brought us to Harvest for 16 years as a member. Mm-hmm. And we have 2 children that are adults, a daughter who's just about turning 25, a nurse in Nebraska, and then Tommy that everybody sees pretty much on the camera, running the camera. He's 22.
Yeah. Okay, so everybody knows your role. You're a pastor's wife.
Yes.
I've sometimes heard people occasionally say, not so much to you, but just in different churches, to a pastor's wife, it must be weird to have your husband be your quote unquote pastor, or is it weird to go to hear preaching and it's your husband preaching or whatever? I'm curious. So there's these questions maybe people have about what's it like to be a pastor's wife? What's maybe one thing that you particularly enjoy about being a lead pastor's wife?
I enjoy being your sermon conversation buddy. You process where you're at in the process of writing the sermon, and oftentimes I get to be a part of the discussion on whether or not you're communicating. I get to tell you what I hear and where I go with it for application or what's convicting me, and that seems to help put final touches at some level. So it's really fun to then sit in front of the teaching, find out the final cut, so to speak.
Yeah. There's actually a number of people who contribute to helping shape my thinking, our ministry staff team as well. But yeah, you're probably top of the list because I have more access to you than anybody. Mm-hmm. So lots of conversations about what the Bible's saying, how it applies. That's it's very helpful to have you help me think it through much more broadly. So if you appreciate the preaching ministry at Harvest, you see one person doing it. There are multiple people, including our very special guest, who contributes to that. But you're all very special. Thank you guys for joining us. I wanted to get the three of you together. Actually, as soon as we first had the idea of doing a Harvest podcast, we were like, what could some of our episodes be? And this was one of the first ones that occurred to me. I'm like, we got to get the three of you together to just talk with the church about what you guys have been doing, because our topic today is self-initiated discipling relationships. So we're kind of drawing from two buckets there of ways you can enter a discipling relationship. One is one that churches would organize. So like through women's Bible study or community life groups, there's a variety of things our church does to put people in groups and in relationships that can create discipling opportunities. And those are wonderful. We hope they continue to happen. They will continue to happen. But we also don't want to just be limited to what the church can do. We don't want people just waiting for the church to organize a group that works for their schedule. We also have always wanted to create a culture in our church where people, our members, are regularly seeking each other out, getting into relationship at times in ways that work for them, and doing discipling together. So that's what we're calling self-initiated discipling groups. And while we still believe in and will continue to do church-organized ones, that's not our topic today. Today we want to talk about self-initiated discipling relationships, because in my experience, a lot of people hear us talk about that, agree that that's a wonderful thing. Most churches, including ours, have people who love the idea of having people who will disciple them or enter into a relationship with them. But we're not really sure what to do about it. If there isn't a group or a program, I'm sitting in the pews on Sunday morning, or I'm standing in the atrium or whatever. What do I do? Where do I go? And that maybe lack of understanding of how to proceed or whatever other hangups we may face. There's quite a few hurdles involved with it. And I think it keeps a lot of us from knowing how to do that. And you guys have now been in a self-initiated discipling relationship with the three of you for, I think we were saying 5 years?
5 years.
5 years yesterday, we were figuring out. Quite a long time. And I've had a front row seat to it. And so I really wanted to help other people in the church just kind of have you guys reflect on how that group came into being, what's made it tick, and how it's changed, because it's not the same as it was at the beginning. Our whole purpose, of course, is not to say this is the way to do it or anything like that, but it's an opportunity to say some members of our church are doing it. And so let's see that and celebrate it in the hopes that it encourages and inspires others to kind of do the same. So I wanted to start at the very beginning. I'm going to ask most of the questions and just encourage you guys to talk about your experience with the beginning of the group, like how this group even came into being. Because I had a front row seat, I'll set that up, and then Amy, I want to ask you to comment on that, because at the time, this was 2017, I think it was, about 5 years ago, I was meeting with a group of men in our church in a very highly structured discipleship group. It was the most highly structured thing I've ever done. We had met specific dates. You couldn't miss too many of them. We were reading books together. I even had them write a couple short papers. They were willing to do that, God bless their souls, to really help form their own convictions. We were doing some leadership training stuff, and it was really good and really effective. But you and I got talking about it one day, sitting out on our deck, and you were thinking about discipling. So why don't you maybe kind of take it from here and how that conversation went, as you remember it?
Well, at the time, you were also making, just in a teaching series, the purpose of discipleship and why it's important. And of course, with Matthew 28 passage of go make disciples, I was in full agreement, but I was watching your modeling, and I just told you, there is no way I can do that. Sorry about the interruption of our dog.
Yeah, this is real life here.
There's no way I can do that. It's too, well, it's great for men. Their season of life doesn't kind of change. They can check calendars, but I struggled with a lot of the structure and the formality to it. And you turned around and said, well, if that's what you can't do, what can you do? So that got me thinking. I was thinking about a season of a woman's life and how we're all very different and have different hurdles as well as obstacles that would prevent, here are the dates, can you do this? commit to this. I'd really like it to be more relationally based, and let's just try and see how we go from there. But the intentionality of making sure we're staying biblically based, prayerfully minded, so the Holy Spirit can really lead, and then relationally intentional. Lots of time to listen, see, pray for one another, because I have always found a lot of the best mentoring, discipling relationships I have had more to do with, Amy, what's going on in your life? How is God teaching or challenging you? How are you applying that? And then as you felt safe, confessing sins would come out and holding each other accountable. And that takes time over a long time period, but it also takes spending a lot of time just talking. So anyway, that's, and then how I built, ultimately, in my own feeling very unconfident, I'm like, I have to choose people I like. So I will confess, these are people I like that were in my sphere. We were all working children's ministry, and I got to know Sharon through premarital counseling. And so I went, well, Lord, if I'm going to take a step of faith and try to initiate something, I need to do it with initial people that I could see I could. And so God's taken me a lot. I mean, that's part of the growth because of this group that I've been able to go beyond that. But initially, no, I needed what I felt like I could see this working. So I approached them individually and then pointed out, each other, let's get together, let's have some tea and just talk, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah. So starting with the first effort that felt unconfident, she hadn't done it before.
Yes.
Finding people that you thought would do this with you, let's kind of give it a risk. So how did you guys get involved? Anybody want to just briefly kind of share your experience of from when she first came to you and how this whole thing started?
Sure. Yeah, I'll start. I remember, Amy approaching me and asking if I wanted to be part of this group and get together on a regular or semi-regular basis for the purpose of discipleship, having a relationship together with one another and just growing, helping each other, spur each other on as we grow in our relationships with the Lord. That's how I remember it first starting. Yeah.
And why did that appeal to you?
It really appealed to me because, especially as a member of the ministry staff, having a demanding schedule, I so wanted to be part of a group that really focused on discipleship. And I wanted a place where I really could be challenged in my faith. And this group has definitely done that for me over the years. Yeah.
So I'll ask you to start for this question, Sharon. So you guys got together. What did you typically do? Think back that first year or two. Okay, you're together. What are you guys actually doing together?
So initially, we were still kind of getting to know each other. So it wasn't like you just sat down and, kind of knew what was going on in each other's lives. So there's a lot of what's going on in your life. But to kind of facilitate that, because you still don't have a relationship yet. So even that can kind of feel a little awkward. Because you're maybe sharing even stuff that you could feel a little bit vulnerable. We had a little bit more structure the first few times we got together. I think Amy challenged us all with bringing something that we used as a tool to get us into the Word. And it was very clear in that first meeting that we needed to do that 1 week at a time, because it took the entire time for one person to share their method, which worked out great, because then I was like, oh, well, we know what we're going to do next time. So there wasn't this, now what do we do? So, it started out with, us each bringing something that helped us get into the Word. You're sharing that with one another, which then opens the door for people to think about, this is another way I could maybe adopt it. Does it work for me? Does it not work for me? We did that. We spent, one of the times Amy got creative artistically, and we made little, timelines, personal timelines. So we're basically sharing our life testimony. So we cut construction paper out and made little timelines, and then I feel like we didn't have time to share our timelines. I think one person shared their timeline, and then the next few weeks we each took turns sharing our timeline. And for our group, that's when we got really personal, because that's where we shared some hurts and stuff. So we were able to get kind of deep and vulnerable really quick with those timelines. And sometimes it was something really awful or rough going on in somebody's life, and we just spent the whole time working on that. And other times it was hey, you guys, God is really talking to me through this, and we shared that, and it really was very, not so structured, but kind of ebb and flow with what God was doing in each of our lives, I would say.
I think the one element of structure or intentionality that I bring to it initially was, the first hour, let's see if we can do something together. So remember Beth showing us how to kind of do some prayer journaling with her walk with the Lord. I had ultimately ended up sharing the AppTat thing that Piper does, and we were practicing that on different areas that we may be struggling, and the promises that we could trust God. So we'd spend an hour doing that, and it's over tea. We always have lots of tea, and then I make sure we've got a whole hour for prayer. So with whatever has come up, if there wasn't anything else specifically shared, then there was times there were any other prayer concerns. And so when we would finally go to prayer, we'd have, at least a half hour to actually pray. And so everything got prayed over, and we took turns really taking time to pray over these things for each other, which I think is the most impactful thing to allow God to kind of come in and work and change, that we're dependent on him for everything.
Which is why we didn't prioritize everybody having the floor.
Agreed.
To get through all of that material. We said, no, prayer is important. Right. We're going to cut it here, and we'll just push that off to next time, so we make sure we had our prayer time.
And in general, my goal was to bring our calendars together, and we put dates on the calendar every 4 to 6 weeks. So we'd meet once, and then if that worked out for you guys, you'd like to do it again, let's put our heads together, and when's the next time we could meet? And in between that, we discovered the WhatsApp chat, and we have a group chat. So we're able to keep each other up to speed on each other's lives, prayer needs.
I will say, I'll interject one thing here. I learned how to use technology for relational ministry purposes by watching the three of you using WhatsApp. I was like, wow, that's interesting. And now we have like a special chat group within the Harvest app for our community life group, so that they stay in touch with each other between meetings throughout the week when we need to. I'm using WhatsApp to do Bible reading with my nephew and my daughter, who both live out of state, and being able to shepherd them, and then connecting with one of our missionaries so that I can actually have a relationship with him. And all of that was like ideas that have come to fruition because of how you guys were using technology like a WhatsApp program to stay in touch with each other in between these sometimes long 4 to 6 to 8 week gaps in between, which was really encouraging for me. Speaking of which, so there was these kind of flexible schedules, there were these intentionalities. I'm hearing kind of a combination of there's a plan, but it's pretty flexible with how it gets executed.
Right.
Did it stay that pattern for the entire 5 years? How has your meeting, either frequency or content, how's it changed over time?
Yeah, well, I'll say it definitely felt like at the beginning we were meeting more frequently in person. Over the years, especially the last couple of years, maybe it has changed, and we are meeting in person less frequently. There's kind of been a shift in our group as the first few years, I guess it was internal, really getting to know each other, really building our discipleship relationships, really stretching each other, encouraging each other to grow. But then our shift kind of took this external focus, and I really felt like it was God-led. I don't know if that was an intentional. You guys can correct me. Totally I don't know if it was like an intentional shift that any of us really like planned ahead, but it was really fun and really cool to kind of watch it happen. That all three of us found ourselves busier and busier in other discipling relationships. And so we would come together in person and via WhatsApp, and we would just encourage each other, and we would help each other problem solve together, share our joys, share our struggles. It's been kind of a fun shift that's happened.
So I think one beautiful and little comical, maybe ironic thing about the shift is we met 2 years ago. Might have been 2. I think it was 2 years ago. It was around the 3-year mark. And we had a whole conversation about what did we want the group to do. And it was kind of this group consensus.
Consensus.
Thank you. That we didn't want it to change. We were like, nope,
right.
not ready. We talked about, should we bring another person in? Should we split the group? Should we branch off and make our own groups but stay together? I mean, it was this kind of interesting conversation about what to go. And it was like, no, we all were like, we don't want it to change. It changed. Almost immediately after that, God moved. It's like we're pawns on a chessboard in a beautiful, beautiful way. God moved us toward other discipleship relationships to reach out to others. And I think that's beautiful that we didn't want to, but you know what? I don't think it was painful for a single one of us. I mean, bits of it, like now I think where we meet so infrequently, it's kind of like we could feel a little disconnected. But I just think it's beautiful that we thought one thing. God had another plan. He made it happen in such a way that we didn't even really see it happening. And it's beautiful.
Yeah.
So I wanted to jump on that. So I'm glad you guys just brought that up, because I think the assumption is a lot of times with people in general, churches in particular, that in order for relationships to go deep, you need to protect them. You need to protect confidences, which is all, of course, true. But the point is, if we want deep relationship, the walls have to go up. So we find each other, whether that's a community life group or just two friends or whatever, we find some people, and then you just got to put the walls up. And you eventually earn trust and you go deep, and then like you can't let anybody else in. Otherwise, you just lose all that trust and it will destroy the relationships. And so there's this inherent tension, right? That we want to go deep with relationships, even for discipling purposes. But then we also, while we're getting closer to one another, we're almost pushing other people away. It's not usually that overt, but that can be sort of like the feel, right? And now we don't want to break up. So there's that belief that that's how relationships work. Plus, and I love what you just said, Sharon, there's just our desire. We've invested a lot in these relationships. And so we enjoy one another's company. And we don't want to lose that. And so there's a lot of momentum as relationships finally do start in a church to just go inward, in the belief that if we don't, it'll actually be contrary to the purposes of discipling. But I've heard a couple of different comments here about like, how does God want to use us for others? How do we stay focused outward, other people that we are now connecting with? So talk about that a little bit. What's this tension between actively pushing yourselves outward at times and yet still having had a relationship with each other that was meaningful and impactful for you spiritually?
During COVID, when you talked about, the church is in dry dock and all the programs shut down, and we had our WhatsApp chat, we'd still try to get together in a safe environment, whether that was outside or whatever. Yeah. We still, for us, community and isolation did not take place, and I was thankful for that. But during that time, too, as you were talking and teaching, I think I was getting a better grasp on, all right, we have a shared purpose, and that shared purpose is the Great Commission. So how do we do this? So I love the fact that at some level there was an intentional leading on my part that was obviously a little bit more hidden. But every fall I did come before them and say, Lord, what are we doing? What should we be doing? We don't want to be ingrown. That's not the purpose here. We're making disciples. So as we mature, how can we branch out? What would that look like? But as we've grown too, we've created these safe relationships. So we need to touch base with one another for support. But these last 2 years, as different things have happened, and we've been able to do other groups, other ministries, these two in particular are invested in one together apart from me. And a lot of times our discipling relationship group, our DRG time, initially, they're just talking about how things are going and problem solving. And I just get to kind of observe and go, God, you're doing great things. So that we are bearing fruit of, now that we're maturing in Christ, how can we help other people mature? So that we have less time. There's the tension. We only have 7 days a week and 24 hours a day. So there's less time. I've got to share that time with others, and we have to kind of split off a little bit. So that feels ouchy. And yet at the same time, because we're doing the work of God to make disciples, that's exciting. So
the relationship's kind of built around the mission.
Agreed.
Of reaching out and making more disciples. So yes, there's some losses if we can be together, but there's also things to celebrate. I mean, that's kind of what I'm hearing, that may sort of counteract that. You guys have any other thoughts on just how you experience that?
Yeah, I just want to say that I think from the very beginning, there was a concept, and you're right, we talked every year. It's not like all of a sudden 2 years ago we were like, do we want to keep this going or not? I mean, we had all had this concept from the beginning, because that's the example Christ has in his word. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations. He came and spent 3 years with 12 men. And then those 12 men, minus one, and then added one, they didn't hang out together for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
They crossed each other's paths. They still encouraged one another, but they didn't spend the rest of their time in one little group. That's the example that set before us. So when Amy kind of started that, we were talking from the very get-go that the whole concept was to spend some time together so that we could then go forth and spend time with other people. So I don't think there was ever a mindset, and I think that's a dangerous mindset to be in, that we just want to find our people and stay with our people. That's not loving our brothers and sisters.
Well, and I think of the Apostle Paul. I mean, he would say, "Send so and so to me. I'm in need of him," when he was in prison. But he was always spiritually discipling them and then sending them out, because he's, building, planting churches and moving on, and he'd leave people there. And yet there were times where he would ask for them back because he needed encouragement and support, but then he'd send them back out. So I think
the reason he asked for him to come back is because he just sent 3 other guys off.
Right, and he's alone.
Right.
So we're not meant to do, I think that's the bigger key. We're not meant to do our Christian walk alone. That's an American isolated kind of mindset, that it's me and Jesus and we're good. I'm like, I know the one another's and the bearing one another's burdens. I don't grow in isolation. I have God's word. I have his spirit, but God's also given me another resource in his local body, his church. And these are my sisters that once I felt safe with them, they could hear and see and relate with some of the worst parts of me. And they didn't quit me. They still love me. They're praying for me. And we're doing that together. And that took time, but we're still able to do that even though we don't get together every 4 to 6 weeks. I mean, this last year I had to go back and went, well, one was canceled because of illness, but there were really only 2 other meetings for this calendar year. And I'm like, and that's okay, because we've been busy doing other things, but still connecting through WhatsApp.
Yeah.
Well, and you're setting yourself up for disaster if you want to find your people and stay with your people, because someone's going to die. Someone's going to move away. It's inevitable, and then you're going to be alone. So if you don't have the mindset of constantly developing other discipleship relationships, you're going to be bereft at some point in time. Yeah. And that's not God's design.
So here's a question I want to ask. This is kind of a rapid fire, okay? I want to ask you each to think of one word that you would use to describe the relationships you have formed within this group. It's just a way of kind of getting you to reflect on 5 years of having been together and the kind of relationships we're describing. One word, and then 30, 40 seconds or less, just why you picked that word.
I'll start.
Okay.
Yeah. The first word that came to my mind is confidant. Because in Sharon and Amy, I have found through the grace of God that 2 people where I literally could tell just about anything to, and not just in the sense that I share something with them and then that's where it ends, but they push me to see and to strategize. Okay, what is God doing? What is he revealing? How does he want to grow you? Where are your sin struggles in that? So it's just precious and amazing having 2 people that I could say just about anything to.
I was going to say safety or vulnerable, just because it is a place
that's 2 words.
That is, I know.
That's
it's going to be one or the other. But
you pick one. You pick mine. So.
I can't keep it succinct. I just don't have that bone in my But it's a place you can come and, like Beth said, you can say what you need to say, and you can be vulnerable, and it's safe to be. But it also, like Beth said, doesn't just stay. There's a challenge. The other word I was going to say was challenge. I know. Challenge was the other word I was going to say. There was 2 of them, and there's 3 of us. I think 3 words is fair.
There you go. Why don't you jump in before she comes up with a 4th?
Well, she kind of picked mine. I said safe, but or known, which I already kind of alluded to. But I mean, to live out James 5:16, that we're confessing sins with one another, so that we, can be healed, so that we can grow. The prayer of an effective man, availeth much. How do you do that unless you don't feel like you're going to be judged in such a way, but at the same time challenged to what does the Bible say? What would be your next steps? What are the hurdles? What's keeping you from that? we exhort one another. Now, building that relationship, there's a lot of affirmation and seeing and loving and meeting, some real needs in the midst of babies being born and illnesses being dealt with and changes of seasons of life and different kinds of needs. And we've lived life together. So with that, I think, yes, it's been a vulnerable place. It became a vulnerable place so that we could bear one another's burdens in such a way that God loves you this much and we love each other that much.
So, final question, because we're headed toward the finish line here. There's been so many good things in here. I love the intentionality, but the flexibility, the willingness to prioritize, the willingness to take risks, to get to a place where you can confess sins. A lot of good things in here. How would you guys respond? Maybe with just an encouragement to any other Harvest members who may be saying, like, this is something I would like. I just don't know how to get started. Just based on your experience, what encouragements would you offer them?
I would just say first to pray about it and then to go for it. I would say start small, pick, like Amy, pick a couple people or a few people. Maybe God is drawing you to somebody. Maybe you need, like Amy, to start with someone that you like, but just pray about the specific people and then go for it. Yeah. Start small and then ask God to grow the group and use the group for his purposes and to grow you. And
I think my biggest encouragement would be, as you've listened to this, who are the people at Harvest that come across your path that you're already kind of beginning to get to know or want to get to know? Ask them to go to coffee, invite them over for lunch. Just take an intentional step of, I'd like to get to know you. Can we get together? You don't programatize it. You just build it. You start with an intentional relationship and work on getting to know. And as you do that, because I had intentional relationships with Beth and Sharon, independent of them for some time. And then I floated the idea, hey, what if the three of us got together? I want to invite you over for tea Saturday morning with this time work. And that's kind of how it just evolved in that sense. But I did behind the scenes have some desires and some hopes, but then it was like, well, all I can do is invite. I have to, put the ball in their court and see if they hit it back. And if they did, great, we're headed somewhere. And if not, don't be discouraged. Try with someone else. I mean, part of it is just being willing to try. And then the other thing I would encourage is there is a Let's Talk spiritual mentoring podcast that Jackie Hill Perry, Melissa Kruger, and Jasmine Holmes do it. It's in season 1. It's on mentoring. Listen to that podcast. That's really good. They deal with all kinds of things. That was really helpful.
The Gospel Coalition?
The Gospel Coalition, Let's Talk, and it's in season 1.
That's good. That's good. Sharon, any final thoughts?
I would also just say, and this is at least for my part, ask me.
Yeah.
One other thing on the Jackie Hill Perry talk was, if you're not being mentored or you're not in a discipleship relationship,
ask someone.
And you want to be, go ask. And if you are still having questions, you can ask any of us. We can tell you more. There's a whole lot more we could have talked about today. So ask.
Yeah, that's so good. Guys, thank you for doing this. Like I said, I was looking forward to it from the beginning. I personally love and appreciate each of you for a variety of different reasons, but not least of which is what you've been doing here. As an elder in the church, I just want to say thank you for being faithful church members to pour into each other and not be satisfied with just doing that, but now multiplying yourselves out into other people. So encourages me, and I just appreciate you guys and want to encourage you to continue doing what you're doing. So thank you for being here and sharing with the church.